Hey guys, I want to talk about the difference between high income earners and those who are generating wealth. Okay. Now, I know on the surface, people are going to start thinking, man, if I'm making a lot of money, I'm wealthy. But let me just throw some scenarios at you really quick. Suppose you don't feel like going to work anymore. Suppose the thing that you were doing is no longer relevant. Suppose your competition has eaten you alive, and now all of a sudden, the money you used to make, you're not making anymore. What you cannot do is go back and revisit all of the vacations you've had, all of the cars you bought if they're not antique, all of the, some of these miscellaneous items that high income earners will find themselves, purchasing over a long period of time. Because in your mind, you're thinking, hey, I'm making a lot of money. This is what the other people that are making money, this is what they're doing. I'm just fine. If something happens to this job, I'm going to go get another. And you find yourself in what I call the rat race. Okay. Now, I'm not being gloom and doom on high income earners. The only thing I'm pointing out today is the high income earner and those who are intentionally, and I use the word intentionally on purpose, building wealth for their future. I'm making sure that we separate those two activities and those two intentions. Okay, imagine one of these days you're no longer working and you decided to quit or do something different, and the money that you were making is 25% of some other thing that's out here that you're not having to touch or do anything with. That other thing is called what we call income producing assets. Income producing assets. All right, let's talk about this a little bit. And I'm Raymond Brown, owner of Symor Investments. You can visit our products at symorinvestments.com. But these other things are what I like to say are assets, income producing assets, things that are on the stock market, real estate. You guys may laugh at this, but education, income producing assets. Okay. And I want to break down what I mean by an income producing asset. An income producing asset is one that's going to perpetually pay you just because it exists. You can think about real estate. Okay. That's another one, real estate. Can you imagine? A lot of us grew up, I hate to use the word the hood, but a lot of us grew up in neighborhoods, and our parents potentially have paid those houses off and potentially left you the house. Now, imagine that you've inherited this house, and some of us who've moved on to say, hey, I live in a better neighborhood now, or I'm doing a little bit better, or I'm in a different city. Some people may look at that inherited home and say, well, I'm not interested in doing anything with that. I'm going to immediately sell it. They're going to get a cash out for that particular home. It's going to do well for them. It's just going to be more cash, alongside potentially what they already have. Now, juxtapose that to own it at home or having it at home, inheriting that home and renting that home out and allowing your children, your children's children, your great grandchildren to collect rent off of it with no end date in sight. That's what I call an income producing asset, something that's paying you just because it exists. Man, that's exciting. And I think if we think more about that, that should be more of a goal of ours when you start, making money, or you can be at any spectrum and start, investing in things like that. Okay. Now, another thing I talked about was, of course, the stock market. And we specialize in that. Of course, I'm going to mention that. Investing in these companies. Can you imagine the year is 2000, and you heard of this thing called Amazon. And this guy starts selling books online. So, okay, that's cute. He's selling books. I can go to Barnes & Noble and get it, or I can jump on Amazon.com. Just imagine if you had invested in that company early on, and you just had that stock and you just owned it. Nothing to do there. You spend, $1,000, $2,000, maybe $5,000 on that startup company, and it started to grow and grow and grow over time. You can look at it today and say, oh my goodness, I started off with $1,000 investment. You guys can Google this. Now it's worth X amount of dollars. Some people will stop there and say, hey, I've made a lot of money, and cash out and put it right back in that pile of cash that they already have out there. But here's the thing with an income producing asset. Not only has that investment grown over time, okay, you $1,000 in the year 2000, here we are all these decades later, it's worth X amount of dollars. That's a lot of money. Imagine not even think to sell it now, but continuously hold it. Now, with the stock market, they do what they call these stock splits, which means every one share becomes 2 or 4, whatever the case is, and you get all these shares of stock. Imagine taking the dividend, which is something that the company will pay its shareholders just for owning the stock. It's called a dividend distribution. They send them a check on a regular basis just because they own the stock. What is that, guy? That's a paycheck. Okay, that's a paycheck. Now, let's look at the scenario. Most of us have come from houses that were potentially paid for right now that our parents may have given to us. So now you're not living there, so you're collecting rent on that home. Then you've purchased stocks because you've heard about this thing, and you say, hey, I want to put some money to work, and I'm just going to buy this company and allow this money to work for me over time. And I get it. Amazon was a gamble at the beginning, but you don't have to gamble. You can invest in Walmart. You can invest in Apple and things that are not General Electric, General Motors. We can go on and on. You can continuously buy shares of stock in those companies, right? And get as many shares as you can put your hands on and wait for the dividends to pay out, right? So now you got a scenario where you're collecting money off of real estate and you're collecting money off of owning these stocks perpetually. Never stops. That's what I call, guys, wealth, assets. Those should be our goals. Now, some people will say, man, I can't afford that, or I got better things I can do with my money. Here's the difference. When you take all of the money that you're earning, and I don't want to say the word burn through, I'm going to say the word spend, because that's the word we like to use. Spend it on entertainment and the things, the excesses of life. You're not, that money's gone, and it has to be replaced again by who? Yourself. By doing what? Spending time on that job. I don't care how good it is, guys. Spending time on a job and earning more cash to replace the cash that you've had. But you have the mindset of saying, well, I'm going to do this forever. Right? And then AI comes around, right? Artificial intelligence changes the whole entire landscape of work. And if something happens to that one income, what kind of scenario are we in? Man, I got to get another job. Why is this happening to me? God, why did you let this happen? I can't believe this is happening to me. When we can go back to Scripture, and it's very intentional about this Scripture. It's in Ecclesiastes. It says, have 7 incomes. No, make it 8. I don't know what's going to come, on the land. It corrects itself in the Scripture. It says 7. Nope, not 7, 8. That means God wants us to not only get collect rent from not only collect rent from the childhood home or any other property, Not only collect dividend payments from the stock market, that's two, then have that job. That's three. God wants you to have four more. So God's like, you trust the system more than God trusts the system. And we can't live like that, guys. And let me say this. A lot of times, people will think, well, this is, I'm going to talk about generational stuff now. A lot of times people will think, well, I got my job. I'm making this kind of money. My children got to do the same thing. They're starting over from scratch. That's that thing we talk about, starting over from scratch, generation to generation to generation. We say, hey, go get a job, get your degree, go get a job. There's nothing for me to hand to you to give you a helping hand. That's the scenario that we're in. When I say we, I mean just as a whole. That's the way people think. The system allows you to think that, or perpetuates it, because it's all consumerism. Everything you see, it's about spending money. It's not about investing. There's no secret that you know more about gaming than you do about investing. It's a whole design, guys. It's a consume first design out here. So you have to be intentional about how you direct your cash. Now, I get it. If you're a vice president or executive at some of these companies out here, they're going to give you a compensation package that's going to include stock options and stocks. You're probably covered, right? If you just allow that corporation to take care of your, retirement goals and financial future. If that's enough for you, fine. But a lot of people, if you look at that, that's the pyramid, right? The pyramid says that, you got your employers, managers, you got your directors, you got your vice presidents, executive vice presidents, and the president. So if I'm going down there, that's a very slim number of people that I can go out to these, what they call the SEC reports, and see the ownership of the. I can see the corporate board. I can see the shareholders, which are these directors. I can see the number of shares that the company's given to them, securing their futures. I can see that stuff in the SEC filings. I see, those people are probably taken care of. But for those workers, you have to be very intentional about ensuring that you're taking the money that you're earning and in securing your future, not just for yourself, but for future generations. Let's talk about stock ownership again. Imagine buying 100 shares of Apple stock. You say, man, that's a lot of money. Imagine every time your child's birthday, you can do your child's birthday, and given that instead of buying the presents, doing all this stuff, buy stocks for the child. And you're talking about a long-term strategy there, because you started age 1, you're going up to like 18, 19 years old, and you're buying consistently on the market. That's generational wealth, because that child, not to write a check for that child to go to college, but for that child to say, hey, I got a base, I have this net worth of X amount of dollars. And if that child continues to add on to that portfolio, again, you're talking at that point generational wealth, because that child can continue to add on and not spend it. They can say, hey, I'm going to hold this stock, allow it to split even more. I'm going to continue to put money in this company. And then the next 20 years, look at what you have. You have an enormous start on financial freedom. And that's what it looks like. So let's talk about just the high income earners. And again, this is not something to talk down upon. We're trying to bring awareness to what's happening out here. The awareness is you got so much spending that you have consumer debt that's probably at record highs. You have this zeal or need to keep up with everybody else. And you got pay that's not keeping up with inflation. Those are three things going against the worker. Three things going against the worker. So you can find yourself swimming uphill when it comes to creating wealth and sustaining wealth over a long period of time. That's why you have to come out what I call the matrix, or that rabbit hole, and say, hey, I got to do something different. If you don't, you're just going to be making a lot of money and doing more things of the same, taking 3 trips as opposed to 1. having two cars or having, going to get that real extravagant car that you really wanted when you didn't really need it. And that's what high income earners find themselves doing. Things like that. You don't want to be that way. And it doesn't, and the things I'm about to talk about has nothing to do with the amount of money you're making. It's about the mindset, the mentality of what you're going to do with every dollar that you earn and every $100 that you earn. Okay. Imagine when you got paid off, and Warren Buffett talks about this. Warren Buffett says people invest what's left. Now, when I said we're investing, of course, we do stock market stuff. It ain't got to be the stock market. It can be real estate. Anything that's an income producing asset, right? Real estate, stocks, things like that. I'm going to say education. I'm going to get to education in a minute. Things like that. Imagine every time you got a paycheck, you were intentional about taking 10% of that paycheck off the top and say, I'm paying myself first. 10% off the top. Then a part of you starts feeling guilty and say, well, man, I am paying myself, but I owe this mortgage, I owe this car note. I got to put groceries in here. I got to, fill the tanks. I got to do all this stuff. It's for me, but I got to do that first. In that scenario, every scenario I mentioned is owned by a corporation that is producing a lot of profit and it has a lot of wealthy people at the top. You, on the other hand, are looking out for them first before you're looking out for yourself. You may say, well, Ram, I got to keep a roof over my head. What do you mean by that? I mean by it this way. If you're going to work every day and if you're putting time away from your family on these jobs, the number one priority is to say, for your sacrifice in doing that, I'm going to take 10% of this paycheck for me and my future. Well, what am I going to do in the future? The future person, my name's Raymond, the future Raymond is going to look back and say, hey, thank you for that. Because the future Raymond has to live in a world where he's not, on that job anymore. Inflation's higher. The value of the dollar is lower. So you're going to need more dollars just to do the basic things that you're doing. So that means you have to be very intentional about having that money grow at least at the rate of inflation. Plus some, you want to have some kind of quality of life. That's very important. You're not going to get that just by making money, spending money, and saying, I'm going to another job. I'm going to continue working. Okay? So we need money to grow. So take 10% off that money and put it in an investment vehicle. When I say vehicle, it's not a car. Something that's going to pay you back over time. Think about that house when the perpetual rent that you're collecting, or the stocks that are paying dividends, writing checks to you just because you own it. Imagine, working 20 years and say I put money away for real estate as well as the stock market for those two incomes. Okay. Now let's talk about education for a second. I see people complaining about, student loans or this education thing. Do you realize that the number one priority or the number one investment you can make in yourself, the number one investment you can make is in yourself? Why, Ray? Because when I learn something, I get to repeat what I learned, and hopefully it's something valuable enough where I'm being compensated for it. If that's the case, I have a perpetual source of income for the rest of my life because I know how to do something that's been paid, and I'm being paid for doing that thing. That's an income producing asset. I've been educated on something, and I'm being paid for that something. So that's an asset that's creating, income for me, revenue for me for the rest of my life because I know it. Unless, of course, you assume you're going to always have a good frame of mind and, you don't forget all this stuff. But that's why education is very important. So let me go back to my quadrants or my, I got pillars. That's what I've been calling it over the years. The top pillars to put your money: real estate, stocks, education. Okay, those are the top three. Then you can say business. If you're, everybody's not a business owner, but entrepreneur, businesses, because you want to keep your business going because that generates revenue as well. And you got to say insurance, right? You got to have the insurance premiums. You got to pay that, but that's something to pay you back as well. Those 5 things, guys. So you're writing this down. That's very important. Those 5 things are important, okay? Those are the places you want to put your money. I can say this. Everything outside of those places I mentioned, now I ain't going to get into antique cars, paintings, gold. I ain't gonna get into that. I mean, somebody can nitpick and say, well, you can do those things. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the main things that are, that people are mainly concerned with. Okay. Of course, we can go down and find 3 or 4 other items to say you can put your money in those things. But if you're writing this down, write down, you're gonna say real estate, stock market, okay, education, a business, if you're an entrepreneur or you invest in somebody else's business. Stocks is kind of like business, but I'm talking about business that you have ownership in. And 5, insurance, right? You want to have insurance out there, right? Something, life insurance, things like that. That's you pay into with the hopes of you or the next generation getting, at some point. So those are 5 places to put your money. We're not gonna count the other stuff. There's a few others that you can count, but we're not gonna count that. I'm gonna say this. Everything outside of that has to be replaced. I'll say it again. Everything outside of those 5 items that you've put your money into has to be replaced. Has to be worked, labored for, and replaced. People say, no problem, Ray. I'm healthy. My job's here. They're paying me a lot of money. I see no end in sight. Until there's an end in sight. Until there's a letter, until there's, health scare, or like I told you before, AI or some other, competitor have come in and made what you were doing obsolete. Then it becomes something that, you say to yourself, I should have known better. I don't know what I was thinking. Okay. So, not so good assets, assets that don't produce wealth, trips, the standard cars, most cars you have, clothes, all the fun, the clubs, hotel, the American Airlines and all that kind of stuff, all that's got to be replaced. All of it's got to be worked for and replaced. Again, high income earners can enjoy all of that. But think about those high income earners or those with very little income buying or contributing to the 5 things I talked about. Over the long haul, those asset producing items is going to outlast that high income earner. Why? Because of longevity. These things don't get tired. Apple stock paying me dividends, it's not going to get tired. A real estate property that's producing rent for me and in future generations, it's not going to get tired. That one income producing job or the person performing those tasks will get tired, will get sick, or the job or task will get obsolete, or the whole industry may become obsolete. Then it's got to be replaced. Some people, the majority of people, will live comfortably with that. Okay, but that's not what we want to do here. We're going to look at creating an environment where not only are you making good money, we want everybody to make as much money as they can out here, but we want you to take that money and put it in wealth. And I want you to know the difference between the two. Okay, having a good job is one thing, having wealth is another. So if you have a good job and you're just buying things and enjoying your lifestyle, yeah, your friends are looking at you and say, oh, you're doing great and I'm so proud of you. You are this and you're that on the job. I get it. But if you're not taking some of that money and putting it into some things that create wealth, it's going to be a problem. You entrepreneurs out there, business owners, you got to be very particular about this. Very particular about this. Because it's easy, because you're a business owner, it's easy to say, hey, I got so much money, I'm making so much money here. What is he talking about? I'm not worried about a stock price or another real estate price. I ain't into that stuff. Well, I'm going to say you better learn it because things change rapidly and you want to be able to look back at the end of the year and see where your money has gone. If you tell me you got it sitting in a bank, I'm going to say, how much money did the bank give you for allowing them to hold that money? 1%, 2%? Know what they did with the rest of it? They loaned it out for a high percentage. So Go get a bank loan. They go, a business owner going for a bank loan, it's going to be a higher percentage than what they're paying the people who are giving them the deposit. They know better. They know cash is sitting there. It's nothing. It's not worth a lot. You don't want cash just sitting there. You want to be utilizing that cash. And that's what, getting these income producing products will do for you. Produce cash for you on your behalf. Okay. So now, again, I want the scenario to be you being very intentional about creating wealth. Now, you know the difference. People use the term wealth building all the time. I want you to know the difference. If you're buying stocks, you're building wealth. You're buying real estate, you're building wealth. Okay? I want you to know that, because those are things that's going to pay you over a period of time that you're not going to get otherwise. So that's very important, and we have to be intentional. Now let me get to levels to what we're talking about. Of course, the high income earners can catch up pretty fast, pretty quick, because they're making a lot of money. They can say, okay, I'm going to flip and get a property. I'm going to get, buy some stocks and so on and so forth, because they are, coming across the cash, even though they don't have the right mindset if they do it that way. I want to train the person who's got $100 in their pocket. At the end of the month, they got $100 to invest. You take that $100, you're going to invest in Fortune 500 companies regularly. You'll be surprised on how much that's going to turn into over a period of time. Okay? And it's a mindset. Think about this, guys. We had a 17-year-old interested in our program, and I told him, I said, hey, listen, having the mentality to take every $100 that you earn and then strategically investing it, whether it's in real estate, stock market, or back in education for him at this moment, that's going to bode well for you. If you got $100 today, if you got that mindset, think about when he's making $1,000 or $10,000. You got the same mentality. Put that money away, allow it to work for me over time. That's the key, guys. You want to have your money work for you. You can't outdo money making money. Money knows how to make more money, right? So if you don't know anything about this stuff, find some outfits that can help you. There are things out here, but before people go that route and go through that effort, they just take it and then go spend it. And this economy out here, this world, the United States, is going to have plenty of places for you to put your money. I tell my daughters all the time, it's the easiest thing in the world for me to do is go put some money on something. People will take your money in a heartbeat on anything that you're interested in putting it in. Okay, so that's what I call the easy route. The difficult route, or more challenging route, is finding investment vehicles, finding things you can put your money in that grows over time. And that's just something that I want you guys to think about. Again, there's a difference between high income earners and building wealth. Okay, you want to be a high income earner, but you also want to take that money and allow it to build wealth for you. And that puts you in a very nice situation where you're making money on a regular basis, good money, and you're also putting some of that money, I say 10% off the top, into things that are going to produce wealth for yourself and future generations. So that's the catch up that I think we as a community need more than anything, is to be able to hand the next generation something else other than bills and a wish and a data boy and congrats on your graduation. We need to start writing checks or dividend checks or handing properties over and things of that nature, because we've had the money. You Google it, our community have trillions of dollars, but it does no good if it goes in one hand and goes right out the other. Does no good. So we got to start putting money into income producing assets. If you don't know how, you got to start learning and going the extra mile to figure out how to invest into things that you kind of care about, right? It doesn't take a rocket science to be on the stock market. It doesn't take a rocket science to go out and invest in a property. It could be the property you're living in. It could be a rental. It could be other things. Airbnb. There's so many avenues out there now for us to put our money in, and we make conscious decisions when we don't. I'm gonna say this in closing. Y'all listen to me good when I say this. every $1 bill that you have in your hand, that you're being paid or whatever the case is, it's either going in two directions, and it's binary, guys. It gets no simpler than this. Every dollar in your hand between now and the end of the year go in two directions: spent or invested. Spent or invested. We're going to get to the end of December. Some people are going to come up and say, Ray, I remember what you said, and 100% of my money was spent. You know why I can say that? Because you're going to get to the end of the year again and have nothing put up. But a lot of good times and memories. Had good times too. Boy, you can have the best times when you're building, a strong portfolio, have real estate holdings, and you're living with 3 or 4 different streams of income. Y'all don't realize how much fun that is. That's a lot of fun too. So that's the kind of fun I want to have. I don't want to just have a good time and have to keep going to work to replace everything that I've earned. So be very intentional, guys, about investing your money and putting your money in things that's going to give you value over the long haul. It needs to work while you're asleep, guys. Anyway, talk to you later. Thank you.